She looked me in the eye and said, "It's either me or your daughter." So I packed her bags that night, threw her out, and watched her entire life unravel while my daughter smiled knowing she'd always come first. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and honestly, nothing felt out of the ordinary at first. We had just finished dinner together. My daughter Chloe had gone back to her mom's a couple of days before, so it was just me and Bethany in the kitchen. She was at the sink washing dishes, and I was standing beside her with a towel, drying plates and trying to make small talk. The day had been long but calm, and I thought we were settling into a comfortable evening. That was when she looked at me, her hands still wet from the dishwater, and said the words that would change everything. "We need to talk about Chloe." At first, I felt my stomach drop. My daughter's name coming out of her mouth in that tone made me nervous. I tried to stay calm and asked, "What about her?" Bethany didn't hesitate. She laid it out right there, in the most cold, unshaken voice I'd ever heard from her. "I can't do this anymore, Derek. The every other weekend thing. The constant disruptions. Having to plan our lives around a teenager who clearly doesn't respect me. Either she stops coming here or I'm done. You need to choose between me and your daughter." For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what she was saying. I stared at her like she had just grown a second head. My heart pounded in my chest, because this wasn't some petty argument about chores or money. This was an ultimatum that no real partner should ever give. I tried to explain, "Bethany, she's 14. All teenagers push boundaries. That's what they do." But she cut me off instantly, raising her voice and shaking her head. "No. Stop making excuses for her. She deliberately undermines me. She refuses to follow the rules I set, and you always take her side. I'm done competing for attention in my own marriage." Her words felt like a knife. I set down the plate in my hands, turned to look at her fully, and repeated what she just said in disbelief. "Competing? You're talking about my daughter. She's a kid, Bethany, and you're my wife. There's no competition." But she didn't back down. Her eyes were hard, her jaw tight, and she said again, "You need to choose. Either she stops coming here or I'm done. Visit her at her mom's place if you must, but I won't have her in this house anymore." Silence filled the room after that. I was hoping, praying, that maybe she would start laughing, admit it was a bad joke, or say she didn't mean it that way. But the longer I looked at her face, the more I realized she was completely serious. She was actually demanding that I remove my daughter from my life for her comfort. That was the moment something inside me snapped into place. I knew right then that I would never look at her the same way again. So I spoke quietly, calmly, like I was talking to myself more than to her. "You're right. A choice has to be made." For the briefest moment, relief washed over her face. Her lips parted in a smile, and I saw the spark of victory in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought I was about to say the words that would cut my daughter out of my life forever. Instead, I turned away from her without another word, walked straight to our bedroom closet, and pulled down the suitcases. The sound of the zipper opening must have been like a thunderclap to her because she rushed in after me, her voice rising with panic. "What are you doing?" she demanded, but I didn't even look at her. I was already pulling her clothes from the hangers, folding them neatly, and placing them in the suitcase. "I'm making the choice," I said. "You're absolutely right that someone has to leave, but it's not going to be my daughter." Her voice cracked as she stepped closer, her panic spilling out in a mix of tears and anger. "Derek, stop. That's not what I meant." She reached out to grab my arm, but I shook her off without pausing my movements. "No, Bethany. You were crystal clear. You asked me to choose between you and Chloe. I'm giving you my answer. Chloe wins every single time." She tried to backpedal then, switching from anger to desperation. "You're being ridiculous. We can talk about this. We can work through it. I'm your wife." Her words came out between sobs, but none of them mattered anymore. I looked at her coldly and said, "My wife would never ask me to abandon my child. Pack your toiletries or leave them behind. That's the only choice you have now." The rest of the night was a blur of her crying, yelling, begging, and trying to convince me that I was overreacting. She claimed Chloe was manipulating me against her, which almost made me laugh out loud. The idea that a 14-year-old girl just wanting to spend time with her father was some evil mastermind pulling strings against a grown woman was beyond ridiculous. Still, I kept packing. By the time the clock hit 10, all her bags were sitting neatly by the door. She sat on the couch with her phone pressed to her ear, sobbing loudly to her sister Meredith. I could hear her say between gasps, "He's throwing me out over that bratty kid." I couldn't make out Meredith's exact words, but the tone was enough to tell me she was shocked too. Bethany kept insisting, "I just wanted boundaries. She's not his real family. I am." That last sentence made my blood boil. I walked over, took the phone from Bethany's hand, and spoke into it myself. "Meredith, your sister demanded that I choose between her and my daughter. Issues. Come pick her up." And then I hung up. When Bethany looked at me after that, her eyes were filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You're making a huge mistake," she whispered. I stood there calmly, my arms crossed, and replied, "No, the mistake was marrying someone who could even think of asking me to give up my daughter. Tonight, I'm correcting that mistake." When Meredith finally arrived, she tried to lecture me about how marriage means working through problems and not being hasty. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I just asked her one simple question. If someone told you to choose between them and your children, what would you do? The silence that fell was deafening. She grabbed one of the bags, and that was that. As they left, Bethany turned at the door, tears streaking her face, and said, "You're going to regret this." I looked at her one last time and said, "The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were sooner." The door closed behind them with a finality that made my chest both ache and feel light at the same time. That very next morning, I changed the locks. Her name had never been on the lease anyway. It was my apartment long before she came into my life. For the first time in months, the place felt like mine again. The days following her departure felt strange, almost like living in two worlds at once. On one hand, there was relief. The heavy weight of walking on eggshells around Bethany was suddenly gone. On the other hand, there was still the shock of what had happened, the echo of her ultimatum playing over and over in my head. I remember sitting on the couch 2 nights later, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, and thinking, did that really happen? Did she really try to make me choose between her and my child? But deep down, I knew it had been real. Her words were burned into my memory like scars you could never erase. It didn't take long before she started reaching out again. At first, it was innocent messages. "Can we talk?" Or, "I miss you." Then it escalated. She showed up outside my building at 11 at night, crying loudly enough that neighbors looked out their windows. She pounded on the door, begging me to let her in, saying she hadn't meant what she said. I stood behind the locked door, listening to every word, but I didn't open it. My daughter was coming over the next morning, and I would not let her see a scene like that. Eventually, Bethany left, but not without leaving a note taped to the door. In big letters, it read, "Don't throw away our marriage over a spoiled kid." That note went straight into the trash. The real blow came when she tried to drag things into court. She filed for a spousal support claim, acting as if she had some right to my money just because we had been married a short while. When I read the papers, my first reaction was anger. But my lawyer was calm and confident. Her name was never on the lease. You have proof that she earns a steady income. And the marriage barely lasted 2 years. This won't hold up. He was right. After a few weeks of back and forth, the judge threw out her case. Watching her face fall in that courtroom was a moment I'll never forget. It was the look of someone who thought they could manipulate their way into winning, only to realize their game had collapsed. Through all of this, the only thing keeping me grounded was my daughter. Chloe noticed the difference right away. She stepped into the apartment one weekend, looked around, and smiled. "It feels calmer in here," she said quietly, almost like she didn't want to jinx it. I pulled her into a hug and told her the truth. "It's just you and me now, kiddo. Nobody will ever come between us again." The relief in her eyes was something I hadn't seen in a long time. It was then that I realized just how much damage Bethany had already done without me fully noticing. The way Chloe had become quieter, more guarded when Bethany was around. Now she was opening up again, laughing freely, telling me about school without hesitation. That was all the proof I needed that I had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Bethany's life started to unravel in front of everyone. Friends who had once supported her began pulling away because they heard the full story. Apparently, Meredith tried to defend her at first, saying I had overreacted, but that backfired. One of her own friends asked, "Would you ever tell your husband to choose between you and your kids?" And Meredith had no answer. The more people heard the truth, the more isolated Bethany became. She tried to paint herself as the victim on social media, posting sad quotes about betrayal and loyalty, but it didn't gain her the sympathy she wanted. People aren't stupid, they could read between the lines. The last time I saw her was about 6 months after everything ended. I was at a grocery store with Chloe, picking out snacks for a movie night. Bethany walked right past us down the aisle. She looked tired, worn out, and a shadow of the confident woman she once tried to portray herself as. For a moment, our eyes met. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but I shook my head slowly. I didn't need to hear whatever excuse or apology she had prepared. My daughter reached out and grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the checkout line. That simple gesture said everything. My life had moved forward. Hers was stuck in the wreckage she created herself. Looking back, I realized something important. Bethany thought she was giving me a choice, her or my daughter. But in reality, there was never a choice to begin with. The answer had always been clear. A real partner supports you in being the best parent you can be. A real partner understands that children are not a threat or competition. And anyone who doesn't understand that, they don't deserve a place in your life. Now, my daughter and I are stronger than ever. We cook together, watch movies, and even started taking a weekend hike every month. Each step on those trails feels like a reminder that we survived something that could have torn us apart, but instead it brought us closer. And sometimes, late at night, when I think about that evening in the kitchen when she made her ultimatum, I actually feel grateful, because that moment showed me her true colors, and it gave me the chance to protect what really matters. If anyone ever finds themselves in a similar situation, I tell them this: don't be afraid to stand firm. Don't be afraid to choose the people who love you unconditionally over those who see love as a bargaining tool. Ultimatums built on selfishness are nothing more than traps. And when you break free from them, you don't just save yourself. You save the ones who matter most. And as for me, I'll never forget the look on my daughter's face the first time she said, "Thanks for choosing me, Dad." In that moment, every doubt, every fear, and every trace of pain was washed away, because I knew I had made the only choice that ever truly mattered.